In mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
E il Papa Leon XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è Tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale. Per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di Comunione e Liberazione.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global Service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospes. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura. Da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina. Cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.
In mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
E il Papa Leon XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è Tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale. Per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di Comunione e Liberazione.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global Service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospes. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura. Da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina. Cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo esiste anche grazie a te.
Allora, buongiorno. Un cordiale
A cordial welcome to each one of you, and I thank you for being here at the opening of this 47th meeting of Rimini. The opening of this meeting is full of the awaiting, the expectation of the arrival of the Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV. The Pope will arrive tomorrow to meet us and to entrust his words to us. We want to welcome him in the best possible way so that he can meet the whole people of the meeting, children, the young people, students, families, those who take part in this, have been taking part in this event right from its first edition, and those who founded the meeting. That he can meet the speakers, the curators, the artists, and the 3,000 volunteers who have made themselves once again willing and able to help to this appointment that lives through because of their gratuitousness. Their generosity. The title of this meeting, The Love That Moves the Sun and the Other Stars, which is the last line of the Divine Comedy of Dante, has found in the encyclical of the Holy Father, Magnificat Humanitas, it found a surprising deepening and an important broadening of its horizon. The Pope invites us to welcome this love which has been given to us, to take up with lucidity and responsibility the challenges of our time. These challenges are so enormous that at first sight they could seem untamable, and without the certainty of a love that moves everything, they could discourage any attempt to face them. a technological evolution that's ever more pervasive and contradictory, a growing fragmentation of social relationships, and a continuous growth in conflicts in geopolitics, to cite just a few of the most important. We'll pick up in many encounters these reflections that the encyclical offers. It's rich of suggestions and encouragement. The Pope asks us to get our hands dirty in the workshop of our time, the building site, and to invite us all in this common building, common construction. For each one of us, there's his piece of wall: scientists, researchers, businessmen, workers, educators, legislators, civil society, popular movements, and faith communities. This is the logic of subsidiarity, which gives value to the cooperation between generations, between peoples, between disciplines and cultures, as the high road to make stability, prosperity, and peace grow. Tensions and differences must not intimidate us. They can become energies, creative energy, when they are oriented towards a shared responsibility. I think that this passage of the encyclical gives a great perspective to follow, with more determination and long-sightedness in the dialogues and the encounters that the meeting has always sought to promote, right from its very first time up to this present new edition. We're honoured that this year again the President of the Republic, Sergio Mattarella, has sent us his message, and with great pleasure I'll read it to you. The meeting of Rimini is a significant appointment. It's reached its 47th edition, and it represents a history, and in times of extraordinary transformation, it proposes that we can continue and contribute in constructing history through. This year, the focus has been put on love. The final line of the Divine Comedy, the love that moves the sun and the other stars, doesn't express only a sentiment or an individual experience. The love that opens us to others beyond ourselves is an interior strength that takes up a relational dimension and social dimension, a particular one, linking the I to you, to us. This breaks up solitude and gives direction to human travels. The difference between this and a false realism that leads to inertia. Instead, when the destiny of communities is that to become protagonists of their own future. The Pontiff Leo XIV recalled this in his encyclical. A humanity that isn't closed in illusory worlds and contaminated with selfishness, but open to justice, to those who suffer, ready to build new bridges, solidarity, friendship, social friendship, gratuitousness of love. These can open horizons in politics, in civil life and the economy. We live in a time in which wars are fought, inequality grows, while narrow oligarchies employ a power even over sovereign states. And the humanity of women and men is from here that we can find the energies to overcome this passivity, this hatred, the aversion to what's different, to the stranger, and to educate ourselves to peace. I wish for the meeting and for all of those who take part in these days in Rimini to continue constructing with generosity these new horizons of humanity. Sergio Mattarella. So let's start this meeting with two extraordinary women who make present the love that moves the sun and the other stars, that this love can truly move and transform our existences in an unforeseeable way. And I ask you to welcome Roseline Hamel and Nassera Kermiche.
For security reasons, Nassera Kermiche can't be recognised, so keep sunglasses on. She's keeping her sunglasses on. The morning of 27th of July 2016, Father Jacques Hamel, he says the Mass in the morning in his parish. Number one. At the end of the Mass, after the blessing, he gets assassinated by two young people. At the arrival of the police, the two attackers attempt to escape and get killed. Soon after, the news of the death of her brother, Roseline Hamel, reaches her. The involvement of her son reaches Nassera Kermiche, and in the afternoon she finds out of his death. It was an atrocious day for them. An undescribable suffering fell upon them, and it's from this day that we want to start. Roseline, what happened that day? How did you live it, and how did you suffer?
That day was a day I never would have expected. And we'd arrived from the north of France to Saint-Étienne-de-Rouvray, to be there to be there with Father Jacques Hamel, my older brother, to help him, to be with him during his last working week, and then we would set off together to go on a holiday. And we'd arrived on the 25th of July, which is the day of Saint Anne. I remember that very evening we'd spoken with my brother, his little nephews were there, and we asked ourselves how the human beings could commit extreme acts of violence towards other human beings. And my brother, Father Hamel, he said to us, and I remember this very well, these young people, they let themselves be convinced that is the religion. And so they search for a way to get attention, but in reality they're maneuvered as if they're puppets, and they're no longer able to think with their own heads, nor even to love, to cry, let alone to recognize their own parents, who until a few months earlier they had loved them unconditionally. And so the evening of the 25th of July, it passes normally, tranquilly. We spent it together. And I recall that our arrival, my brother said to us, so I've tidied up the room for your arrival, but I'm too tired to make dinner. And then that evening, something strange happened. Right at the start of dinner, he said to us, I must communicate an important thing to you. I'm really happy to be here at the table with you. And it was a lovely phrase, but a bit strange for how he was, for his character, because he wasn't used to expressing his joy. Usually, he could only say a few things like that after a few days that we were there with him. And also, it wasn't the first time, in fact, that we got together with him as a family around the dinner table. And another thing he said, that with regard to the topic that we discussed earlier, he said that the time has come that politicians should put themselves really at work, should get to work. And unfortunately, he didn't know what would be his destiny, his fate the next day. And so we arrive on the 26th of July, excuse me. And we hear that my brother, Father Hamel, got up very early because he needed to go and celebrate Mass. But he forgot that all of us were still asleep, because in fact he's used to living alone. So he wasn't used to having other people in the house, and so we heard him doing his usual things, making all the usual noise of getting up. And at a certain point, we hear that he opens the door. And we hear that at the same time, we smell the coffee, the smell of coffee which is pervading the house. And we're still all in bed. And maybe if we'd come down, we could have drunk the coffee with him. But we decided to not do that, and maybe to take a coffee together when he comes back in after Mass. And so Jacques, my brother, opens the door again. We hear it creaking. and he heads off to the church. After a bit, we go down. We get up. We go downstairs with the little children, his nephews of 5 and 2 years, and to have breakfast together. He also he'd left the breakfast things ready for us: bread, marmalade, butter, and we're all there when the phone rings. I don't usually answer that telephone because I don't belong to that parish, so I'm not able to give information about the mass times or whatever. And so I hardly ever would answer the phone. But one of my little nieces said, "But Granny, why don't you answer the phone? Answer the phone." And so she says, "Answer the phone, because otherwise the noise will cover the sound of the telly, and we won't be able to watch our cartoons." So okay, I pick up the phone and hear of the voice of the other person who says, Am I speaking with the presbytery of Saint Etienne of Rouvray?" And I said, "Yeah." And the other person on the other end of the line asks, "Could you confirm that there's a hostage situation taking place at the Church of Saint Etienne of Rouvray?" I said, "If this is a joke, then whoever you are, it's not funny at all." And I add, "My brother will come back from the church in about a quarter of an hour, so I'll ask you to phone again a bit later." And this person says to me, "There's no need that I call again. You've answered my question." And for months and months, I asked myself, really, what did I say that could have satisfied his question? After having put the phone down, I go back to the kitchen, and as I turn round to my nephews and nieces, and I say what I'd heard at the phone, and I said, "But I think that this news can't be true at all, but nevertheless, I'll go over to the church." And my daughter says to me, "Okay, I'll come and open the door for you." And then she says, "Mum, I don't think you'll be able to get over to the church because the road's full of people. You'd need to have there's military there. You'd need to push through all the people they're closing the shops." And in particular, on the path that leads to the church, a soldier with his gun, he's there, and he says, "You can't go beyond here. Stop there." And I insist. I say, "No, I need to go ahead because I need to go into the church. My brother is there. He's the parish priest. I need to go and look for him." And this soldier, he says to me, "No, you absolutely may not pass. You must stop here." But I continue to complain, to insist. And my daughter says to me, "Mum, don't push it. Don't insist. It won't do any good." And the rifleman was turned in front of, so the gun's pointing at me, and this terrible-looking soldier says to me, he says, "You need to go to the funeral undertakers. That's where we'll wait for you." So, and there we wait for hours. We're there next to the next to the mortuary chapel, and already had a worrying presentiment. We're waiting there for hours without any news, but I wait trustingly. Somebody brings us a coffee, and then I say, I didn't need to drink coffee to get more agitated, but above all please remain calm, because inside me I want to continue hoping. And my daughter says to me, "Knowing you, I'm struck to see you so calm and patient. And I thought that you'd have exploded by now." I said, No, I haven't exploded, because I was full of hope. I thought that it was impossible to do something evil in a church to a clergyman who was celebrating the Mass, who was celebrating the Passion of Christ, and sharing this right with people, with his parishioners. Most of those being elderly people. And so for me, it was something unthinkable that somebody could make an act like such an evil act against people like that. After a couple of hours of waiting, we're told that we can leave, can go out. But it's said to us to wait close to a window in the courtyard, and frankly, I start to be upset. And once more, my daughter says to me, she tries to calm me, and she's saying to me, "Mum, we've waited this long. We can wait another 5 minutes. Be patient." And so I wait. And in this little courtyard of the undertakers, two firemen arrive. The people who usually help people when there are catastrophes. They're there, standing up on their feet in silence. And then a third person comes in with a white shirt that's all covered in blood. And this person doesn't speak. She also is in silence. And then a nurse arrives with a stethoscope around her neck and a doctor's bag in her hand. All four of these people are there in silence without offering a word. And so I turn to them saying, "But you're all here. Why haven't you brought my brother here with you?" And they're still dumbstruck in silence. And so I really start to lose my patience, to get angry. And I lose my calm. And I turn to these four people again. In quite a brutal way, I say to you, "Move it. Go and get my brother." But then, in that precise instant, there comes in a young person, an employee of the funeral directors, and she had got the terrible task of passing to me that terrible notice. Those four people in front of me didn't have the courage, didn't have the strength to give me that news, and so this young lady, I remember still, She'd prepared herself to give me that terrible news in the courtyard. And I see her in front of me, turning towards me, and she walks towards me and she says, "I'm afraid everything's finished." There were 2 victims. One is wounded and is in the hospital, and the other instead has died, and that's your brother. I'm shocked there, as if I'd been hit by a bullet myself, as if something had exploded inside me. I start shouting out desperately. I start shouting out my brother's name. I couldn't believe a news like this. I really didn't believe it. And I call for him desperately with all the voice that I've got. I'm calling out for him with all my energy that he would come back to me. I was awaiting him so much. I was waiting for him so much. And my daughter, my older daughter, who is still next to me, she says, "Mum, I beg you, I ask you, please stop shouting. It won't make Uncle come back." And the nurse says, "If your mum needs to shout, even for 2 hours, let her shout." And so I wasn't shouting for 2 hours. I shouted with such a violence that it gave me a problem in my diaphragm. And a few months after, I underwent underwent a lung operation. I had my lungs cleared, and I had to undergo this operation. But thanks to the Lord, I got better. After they take us into a crisis unit, and I recall having passed all the afternoon in a kind of a bubble, in a kind of parallel dimension. And in that moment, I felt myself completely disconnected from reality. And for a moment, I thought that maybe I was on a movie set, one of those scenes that you see on the TV, in which, like, you see those hard-headed people who intervene and everything finishes well at the end. But unfortunately for us, there wasn't the happy ending. Quite the opposite. That day was tragic at an unthinkable, unimaginable level. And whoever has lived such a tragedy can understand the level of this tragedy, the pain that was poured out on us.
An undescribable suffering for Roseline, but also for you. How did you live this day? For me, this day started very early. I saw my son around 7:30. I woke up at that time, and I remember that morning I saw my son. Maybe God conceded me one last time to see him one last time, and I asked him why he was awake so early, and he told me, well, I woke up, and so I told him to go back to bed, and so I went back to my room. And I remember that I turned on the TV, there was nothing to watch, and so I fell back asleep. A little time afterwards, I remember that the phone rang. It was the police that called me. He asked me if my son was at home, and I saw him little earlier, and so I thought that I hadn't slept a lot. I gave it for granted that he was still in home. I told him he was in his room, and they told me to go check, so I went downstairs and I saw that he wasn't there. And I say, well, if he's not here, he's gone out, I don't know where he went. And I asked them, and she tells me there's been an attack at the church of Saint-Étienne, and she remained shocked. I remained shocked because I didn't expect the news of an attack in that church, and I asked her, why are you calling me? Why do you think Adele is involved? And she replied, I don't have any other news, but I'll keep you updated. On my part, I began to get worried. I switch on the TV, I see the news, and I see that they were talking of an attack, but they weren't giving any details. And I remember asking my daughter to go check to see what was happening at the church. Maybe she would have seen her brother, my son. A few minutes later, she calls to tell me, Mum, there's lots of people, the police is here, I can't see anything. And everything's blocked, everything's barred. I can't get past around 100 meters from the church. And so I can't see anything, no one could see anything. I told her not to worry and to come back home, and she came back home. And in the meantime, the police called again to ask her. I called them to ask if there were any updates, and they told me no. That at the moment they didn't have any other notices, and so I remain trustworthy, hopeful. I thought it was impossible that my son had done such an act, and the police had told me about a hostage situation. I couldn't believe my son was involved in such a thing. And then minutes pass, hours pass, and I think that my son would come back from within minutes, because he had to be home by 12:30 for a rule that we had, but he didn't come back. My son didn't come back, and around 11:30, a journalist came round to our house, rang our doorbell, and straight away we were hesitant because we didn't want to open. But my daughter tells me, no, you have to open the door. You have to know why he's here. Why is he here? What's the motive behind his visit? And so I let him in and asked him why he came to see us, and he told me it's because he heard the name Kermiche at the church. And so we begin to really get worried. But inside me, I'm still held up by hopefulness that my son would come back home within minutes. But it was already past 11:30, and my son, I repeat, he could come only stay out until 12:30 maximum. So we wait. In the meantime, there's my daughter near me, my daughter Sabrina, my other daughter, and my son. But Adele is still missing. So we call everyone in the meantime, acquaintances. And 12:30 comes round and Adele still isn't home. My daughter Anissa tells me, wait, Mum. So I try to she tells me she tries to contact the people in charge of his electronic bracelet which he wore. And we asked them, I hear my daughter asking them, why has he been killed? What have you done to him? And from the other part of the line, they say, don't worry, nothing's happened, nothing bad's happened, and they put down the phone. And so we really begin to panic because we switched on the TV and they talked of death, wounded people, but we didn't know who or what had happened inside that church. I called the police again to ask for updates. And she asked me, how was he dressed, what was he wearing? And so I tell her he was wearing a shirt, tennis shoes, white and blue trainers. And so she asked me, is he here with you? Is he come back? And I tell her no. And I ask her again if she has any updates. And she tells me to do everything I can to find him. But probably in that moment, she already knew what had happened, but she didn't have the courage to tell me simply from the phone. And she tells me, come back, your whole family at home and gather at home because there'll be a search. And so we were already all there. Some friends had come round because he'd heard voices, news on the TV about the possible involvement of Adele in the attack. And so in around those 2 hours, we gather in our house, family, friends, but we still didn't have news. The police arrive in the meantime. The special brigades, so all these people arrive, these police, these various units of police, they arrive and begin searching the house. They empty everything, drawers, cupboards, closets. They ask us for our phones. And so we switch off everything, phones, TVs, and we didn't have any news at that time, so because everything was switched off, we didn't have news from outside. But at that point we'd understood that Adele was involved, but never would we have thought that he was dead. And so the search went ahead. It lasted 4 hours. After 4 hours, we get asked to follow the police to the headquarters. We're obviously very worried. We have lots of questions. We have lots of doubts. What happened? Why are we here? And I remember this policewoman asking me, do you know why you're here? And I replied, it seems that my son is involved in some way in the attack of Saint-Étienne. And she tells me, yes, and he's dead. And it's like this that I came to know the news of the death of my son, and I had the certainty that he was dead. And this notice, this news, really came down on us, and it seemed like the sky had fallen on our shoulders. We didn't expect it at all.
E così è iniziato.
And this way, for all of you, started a long period of sufferance with lacerating questions without an answer. Even and above all, for that a certain social isolation, because evidently, in the town, people would look at your family in a certain way after that. But after a bit of time, this encounter happened between you. Roseline, how was your initiative to encounter? How did it start? It started straight away when I got home. My children, my nephews and nieces, they were present. My grandchildren, sorry. They'd gone back to their place, and I started to cope with this pain of this infernal day. When I was at home, I started to ask, how could I have survived all of this? How could I have found any kind of meaning once more in my life? So I started to speak and to dialogue with the Lord. For months I carried on, seeking to find a response. And I was impatient. I was impatient because I couldn't manage to find an answer. I was looking for an answer in the gospel. I was looking for a word, a parable, something that would comfort me, that might respond to my questions. And I found at the end a phrase, after a few weeks, of a similar story. This story of a man who was carrying a burden of pain with him, who had a friend, apparently who wasn't seemingly close to him, even if he'd promised to be with him, no matter what happened. This man, this suffering man, carried a great burden. And he says to his own friend, "But where were you while I was suffering so much?" I was near you," said the friend. "But why are you lying?" "No, I'm not lying to you," he responds. "You're suffering this great burden that for you was so heavy that I carried you on my shoulders. And so those footsteps on the sand, those are mine." And so there I found an answer to my question. And then at the celebration of Sunday Mass near my home, I heard the same parable in a homily. And the homily was really dealing with this topic. And so I said to myself, so, okay, yeah, God is answering me. And then I let myself ask him, give me the way I should follow, a way of life that has a meaning. And like this, I went ahead for a year. I reflected for a year. And then after a year, I was desperate. I was ready to let it all go, to let myself die. But I picked myself up and I said to myself, really, with my children who'd suffered with me on that day, I need to find strength to go ahead. And so I went to pray in front of the Pietà in my church, and I straight away thought of the Virgin Mary, she who had undergone this martyrdom of her own son without being able to intervene, just like us, just like me. And so I asked Mary, Holy Mary, give me the strength to be able to walk in those footsteps in the same way that you walked in the footsteps of your son, and seeking justice, truth and peace. And one morning I was really tired, really worn out. I didn't know what to do. And I was in front of my cup of coffee, and I said to myself, but God, say to me, who could suffer more than me? And in the following mornings, I woke up with an obsession in my head. I continued to think about that woman who I didn't know, this mother, this mum, like me, with her children. And I said to myself, my Lord, if I was this mum with a son who'd committed such a horrible act, what kind of pain would I feel then? And so I imagined for myself the suffering of this mother, this woman who I didn't know, with the sense of guilt that she might have, and it was a natural thing. And with the looks of disgust that people might have on her, maybe she'd lose her work, the trust of her colleagues and her friends, everything. And I said, no, I can't leave this woman alone because she's suffering more than me. I need to find the path, I need to find the way, I need to understand where she lives. And so I contacted the Archbishop of Rouen to ask if maybe this was an idea, a wrong idea, a mistake. And he said, no, go ahead and do it. Call me so I can come with you. I can accompany you. And it's this way that I started my journey to find a contact with Nassera. And for a few months, we spoke on the phone. Every couple of weeks, we spoke. And then 6 months went on. And let's say that the conversation was as ever more deeper. And at the end, I felt able to ask Madam, that lady, that day's is. Can I come and meet you? And she said, it's been a while that I've been waiting for you.
And you were waiting for her? See, when this thing happened, this tragedy, the whole family obviously was devastated. For a month, we lived outside of our house because there was journalists, reporters who were always in front of our house, so we couldn't stay there. We went to my daughter's house, and at the start, I saw the news 24/7 to try and understand what had happened, why it had happened, in what way my son could have partaken in this attack. I couldn't understand. And after some time, I thought of the nuns who were in the church, the parishioners who were there. And I said, no, I have to meet them. I have to try and call them, to contact them in some way, to understand what happened really that day. And so I took the initiative, and let's say that I tried to contact them. I was able to contact the nuns. And sadly, I did it a bit too soon because it had just been 2 months that this tragedy had happened. It was still fresh. And they said at the start, well, at the moment, we still can't talk about it. It's too hard. And I understood it because it had to have been a great trauma. And I said, well, it's fine. We'll do it later in another moment when you're more calm and we won't suffer as much. I started work again from the very beginning because I told myself if I didn't start to work, I wouldn't have been able to go on. But I was a bit like a robot. I told myself, no, I have to go on. I have to stay alive for my family, for my children. I don't have the right to let myself go, because if I fall, they will fall too with me. At the end of the month of August, the boss of the high school where I worked, he asked me, Mrs. Kermiche, do you want to restart work? What do you want to do? Or do you want to find another solution? And I wasn't able to reply straight away because I didn't expect this call. And when I put the phone down, my children said, no, you can't, Mum. Your students are waiting for you. You have to go back to work in school. The students are waiting for you. And so sometime later, the directors called me, Mrs. Kermiche, we want to see you in the office. I thought that they would have told me, we can't keep working with you because of what has happened, and because what has happened is so dire. We can't risk to work with you. We can't have you working with us. But instead, in front of them, they asked me to tell them what had happened, and I told them my side of the story. At the end of the story, they told me, Mrs. Kermiche, we're behind you, we've got your back. And this gave me the impulse, the stimulus to start working straight away, because my children, I told myself, yes, my children are right, my students are waiting for me, all my colleagues were waiting for me, and they were there. And one day, one of my colleagues asked me, Nassera, there's a journalist, a reporter who wants your phone number. At the start, I was a bit scared because I told myself I wouldn't have been able to talk to him, to the reporter, because I was so afraid to talk about my side of the story that I didn't feel able to talk to him. And she said, no, it's a journalist, a reporter for the sister of Father Hamel. And this was a great shock. And I said, yes, I want to meet her. So we started to call 5 minutes at the start, which became 10 minutes, an hour. And one day she proposes to come and see me at Saint-Étienne. And I tell her, well, it's a long time that I've been waiting for you. That's how I replied to her. And so this is how the meeting between us happened.
L'anno scorso
Last year was published in France the book in which Roseline Hamel and Nassera Kermiche recount their experiences of pain and of meeting, with the title Sisters in Pain, in Suffering. This year the Italian version was published by Ares Editions and the Vatican Publishing House, and you can buy it at the meeting bookshop. And in this book you can find a note that Roseline Hamel left at Adèle's tomb when they went to find this tomb, which for safety reasons has to be kept anonymous. And so Roseline wrote this: Adèle, the soul of my brother, Father Hamel, brought me to you. It's a testimony of his pardon. The faith of the believers is hope. Pardon, forgiveness is the way of peace. I pray to the God of Abraham, Father of all believers, that you may find peace, that his spirit of goodness and mercy will reach you. An evil spirit stole your soul. With the pardon that I offer you, I implore Father Hamel and the God of love, that they may recognize in you the soul, the spirit of a sensible, sensitive son and honourable. I thank the Lord, and glory to God and peace to people of goodwill. Roseline, the sister of Father Hamel.
Where was this born? These words.
I discovered the day that the book came out that we needed to do a promotion thing with the publishing house, and so I am leafing through the book, and I get to this page where I see this page, and I said to Nassera, this note wasn't for you, it was for Adele, for your son. I'd hidden it under the little stones on the tomb in a plastic envelope. Well, it's a shame that it remain under the stones, and that would be a shame. And so she took it home. When I reread what I'd written, by that point, 8 years had passed by since I wrote it, and so when I wrote those words, just 2 hours, 2 years had happened since that terrible day. It was just 2 years later, and I said to myself, "But in what way, in that suffering after 2 years, how did I manage to find the strength to use to write these words?" And I said to myself, no, it couldn't have been possible otherwise. My brother gave me these words. Certainly, I had shared them, and I thought about them because I'm the one who I proposed to and asked her to go to the tomb of Adele, of her son. But it was the language that I got the habit of hearing from my brother since I was young. These were typically the words of my brother who would say these things. And in the suffering, it's 2 years after the tragedy, when I wrote those words, my brother, the Father Jacques, the uncle of my grandkids, said he gave me these words. Maybe it's difficult to understand, but it's part of the first fruit of the martyrdom of Father Hamel.
And Nassera, at some point you decided to tell everyone your story, to let it go public with the book that you published, and you needed great courage to do this. Where was this courage born? What was the motive behind this decision to let everyone partake in this experience? It's true that when it happened, I was ashamed of what had happened because I felt a strong sense of responsibility because I'm a mum and it had been my son who'd done this. And so my education for me was put into question, how I'd raised my children, and I'd raised them all in the same way, but Adele had deviated, sadly. He was a normal child, absolutely normal, a child who loved life, joyful. He loved moving a lot, he loved being in motion. And sadly, he met some people who took him down the wrong path, and I saw this deviance. I'd already contacted the police, the authorities, everyone. I told everybody, but nobody helped me. And so I told myself, I have to witness and give testimony to what I'd done, because people maybe would think that I'd been there waiting for this to happen, doing nothing, but it wasn't like that. I did put work in. A lot of time before the attack, I asked the mayor of the city where I live to do something for me so that my son could find maybe a job or participate in some sort of training, but sadly nothing was done for him. Together with him, I tried to let him participate in some of these trainings, make him get his license, his driving license, so that he could do something. We did a lot of things with my son before the attack happened, but sadly, these people that dragged him down the wrong path were much stronger than us. So at the start, it was true. I didn't want to speak because I told myself, no, nothing. It's too late. Nothing will come out of it. It's already happened. The people will look at us in a bad way. They'll humiliate us. But when I met Roseline, it made me want to tell my story, because I wanted people to understand that we'd put the work in, that we did everything that was in our hands, everything that was possible to prevent this from happening. And this is why I'm doing this witness, this testimony, to shout with my loudest voice that we did everything that was possible so that this would not happen, but sadly it did.
I thank Roseline Hamel and Nassera Kermiche for their testimony, also for the courage that they've had to make us participants in what they've lived. I cannot add anything to this, to what they've already said, because already this goes beyond what we can understand. What we can seek to put ourselves in their suffering as far as we can, but we can, for each one of us, grasp the fact that love can move the heavens, the sun, the stars, and also our hearts, if we let it enter, even in these moments so dramatic that those two have recounted. I thank you all for your participation, for taking part, and I wish you all a good meeting.
Merci.
Thank you.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Uno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo esiste anche grazie a te.
In mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
E il Papa Leon XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è Tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale. Per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di Comunione e Liberazione.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global Service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospice. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura, da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina, cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.
In mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
E il Papa Leon XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è Tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale. Per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di Comunione e Liberazione.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global Service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospice. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura, da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina, cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.